Voyager's passage by Jupiter accelerated towards a close encounter with the planet Saturn. Saturn's gravity will propel it on to Uranus. And in this game of cosmic billiards after Uranus, it will plunge on past Neptune, leaving the solar system and becoming an interstellar spacecraft, destined to wander forever the great ocean between the stars. And as Voyager should, sometime in its distant future, encounter beings from some other civilization in space, it bears a message. A phonograph record, golden, delicate, with instructions for use. And on this record are a sampling of pictures, sounds, greetings, and an hour and a half of exquisite music, the Earth's greatest hits. A gift across the cosmic ocean from one island civilization to another.
I know there are two schools of thought about sending messages.
There are two camps. One says it doesn't really matter. Sentient beings are really far away, so you should just try and make contact. But there is also the concern that you don't want to be on the losing end if civilizations meet. If you are on the lower technology scale.
If they are able to visit us, it's guaranteed for sure that they are far more technologically advanced than us. Because we only managed to land man on the moon. Whereas if they are able to visit us, it means that they are technologically superior. Culturally, maybe superior, I'm not too sure. Hopefully, they would have reached a stage whereby they do not have malicious intent. But like it or not, they will, in a way like the early colonists, they will start to impose their way of life.
That's right. And from human history, this has not turned out well. Like when the colonists went to the South Pacific Islands, we can learn a little bit from those incidents. So, personally, I'm not completely sure that we should try and make contact. Just because, we are not a particularly advanced civilization.
Have you read The Dark Forest Theory by Liu Cixin? His work deals entirely with that. He talks about the Dark Forest Theory. So basically, if one civilization in the universe can hear another civilization, they have the resources to destroy each other. When you run out of resources, you move on to the next habitable planet. In order to survive as a species, you must kill the other. Therefore, you should never reveal your position in the universe. Okay, look at it this way. We're the top species of our planet, right? Look at what we have done. We're not very good at it, are we? So, if there's another species even more top than us, then life as we know it would not exist. That's why I would not send up anything. Imagine if one day they just rolled in. You have Russia, China, the US falling over themselves to get their hands on light speed travel to reverse engineer the technology.
Stephen Hawking says no, right? Because he says that we are ridiculously not advanced and yet we are kind of calling for trouble. In the beginning of the science endeavor, everyone is so enthusiastic, the sky's the limit. And now I think after so many years of being engaged in these undertakings, you start to realize that space is so vast and there are so many phenomena that we cannot understand. We cannot reconcile the theory of relativity and gravity with quantum physics because the two just don't match. The laws could be very, very different out there. The fourth, fifth dimension, the tesseract, and so on. So I think that it's a bit too early to contact. I mean, we already can't communicate properly to people with very firm views on certain things, even within the same culture. So I find that it's a bit risky and presumptuous.
Like it's so presumptuous that they're even. Like you're basically expecting them to perceive us the way that we do, right? Like you're using humanity as a benchmark for establishing contact.
If they are aggressive and superior, I think we wouldn't have very much hope, would we? Because, actually the human race is very vulnerable. I think if we think that we are the only life form, Maybe we're thinking too highly of ourselves, but we don't know. I mean, the universe is a huge place and we're just one little blip in it.
I'm not so worried about the aliens. I think they should be more worried about us, right? I mean, we're crazy, you know? Human beings are really very fucked up.
They'll be laughing at us. They'll say, these stupid earthlings, we always shoot ourselves in the foot more than we always blame the government, blame authority, blame everybody but ourselves. You know, I've always been very intrigued. What if some smarter force has already landed and took off because they say, this place, so useless, not worth it, I don't want to stay here. This is not the first time something was sent up into space. It started with Pioneer, 1970. That was Carl Sagan, okay? Then it was Pioneer.
Pioneer 10 and 11, what they had was the plug on the spacecraft. But at the point of time, it was static and the message, in a sense, was fixed.
Then in the late 70s, they sent the Voyager I and II, in which they sent out everything. Music, language, everything of human invention was put out there.
Yes, it's the golden record, that's what you mentioned. They record sounds of Earth, of the rain, the storm, the ocean, as well as the various greetings in the various languages and so forth.
I like it. They sent the gramophone and everything out there. I said, hey, you sure it was maybe the vacuum of space will protect it lah?
Yeah, well, I thought it was kind of flaky, but it's nice. It's all for us, for letting us human beings realize what really is our identity.
Imagine, 1970, already this idea of reaching out into space across galaxies. And the more and more galaxies we find, the smaller we become. We've been the superior being for 300,000 years, and yet we're so infinitely small. And the Voyager is still traveling.
I think the Voyager is traveling at the speed of about 17 kilometers per second, and at that speed, to reach the nearest star, well, other than the sun, it's going to take at least 70,000 years. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. If by chance we do find them, it's going to take several thousands of millennia or even millions of years from now, and by then, a lot of things would have changed. Life on Earth may no longer exist.
The golden record, it's right outside the solar system. Well, space is a very big place. I mean, statistically, we believe there's intelligent life out there. But within our solar system, we are probably the only ones.
I guess it boils down to the intentionality of why you're sending out a golden record. Like, if you're going to be reaching out to potential life in the universe, are you hoping that they want to connect? Are you hoping that they are not wanting to take over the Earth?
I have to send a message to the alien. What message I'll try to send?
Wait, would this be the whole world is sending stuff and what is Singapore's part of it? Or is this only a representation of...
Representative? You mean a message from us to them?
Like, is this Singapore as a standalone entity, or is it Singapore in the context of the world to these aliens or whoever?
So you're looking for how would I convey a Singaporean to an alien or anybody?
So it will be a Singaporean message?
I mean, basically your question is if supposing some extraterrestrial would to view Singapore and to see what kind of impression it would get of us, right?
How can you summarize Singapore with 50 years of history and a 5 million population into one sentence?
One normally has an audience in mind when doing a communications piece, right? So this is really quite out of the box in the sense that you don't know who or what you're communicating to or with.
I don't find this an easy question. Depends on who you meet with, what?
Which is actually absolutely what it's like to publish a book. You don't know who's going to read it, and it's like putting up a play. You don't know who's going to watch it, and you don't know how they're going to respond.
Meet older people, will greet them first. Meet common friends you see every day, say good morning. Meet neighbors, depend on timing. Morning, ask if they are going to work. Afternoon, ask if they've eaten. Everything is about timing.
So I guess I learned a while ago that for me it was important to tell a story. Obviously, it's a version of a story we want to tell, by the very virtue of the fact that we are picking certain things to say.
The latest theory is that the reason why we were successful is because we could communicate well. We understood the power of the story, so we learned stories and we believed stories, and that's what got man so powerful, the ability to come together and to believe in a story. But This guy is going to pick up this space capsule and open it up in 700,000 years' time and has to figure out, well, who the hell is this? What is this? Who is it? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, is the premise that the Voyager got to them first and we got to them second? That was season 1 and this is season 2? What if Singapore was doing this and this was going to be a representation or a message from us to them?
But does this golden record need to be a repository of sounds, of meaningful, or could it be something else? Someone mentioned images, right? This golden record, is it a record of things, a record of sounds, or a record of how do we communicate that we get to being Singaporeans, that we are this special race of people who live on this funny little island with no resources and have lots of different ethnic races that we pretend are harmoniously living together?
I suppose the beauty about it is you never really know if anyone's going to pick it up, right? So you've got to be prepared. In other words, if really an alien comes and knows nothing about you, you're in trouble, right? Don't wait for the alien to arrive before learning how to communicate with it.
I think that's a good question. We should ask the general public what they would like to send up to another civilization.
Just a simple hello. Just a simple hello.
Hello from the children of planet Earth.
Hello! Say hello in a lot of languages.
Most cliche one is send the language law. From what I know, right, the previous legit CD that they sent out, right, was hello, hello, hello in a lot of different languages. So I think, right, we should send in at least
Just a snippet of what kind of languages we speak. Like ni hao, le ho, sawadee-ka, selamat pagi.
Later they come on, selamat pagi.
Then maybe we should send our message in Singlish, combine all the different languages, then people can definitely tell it's from us.
But then we don't even say hello to one another actually. Like, when was the last time you said hi to someone on the train? But that's exactly what we're trying to do with this golden record. Saying hi to someone on this galactic train that we don't know.
But it doesn't matter. When we say in space, it's as much for our benefit as for theirs. Because we want to leave a mark in the universe.
I'm here.
I was here.
I'm a girl. I'm a young adult. I'm a student.
We were here.
Because without a home, what is me? So without Singapore, who am I?
We exist, but think about the possibility as life outside of Earth.
I want to know if there's any aliens or not.
Are there aliens in space? Are you all there? What you all do?
Is there anywhere in space that we could live so that we don't have to stay in this super hot planet?
Yeah, don't come here if you don't like hot environments.
Just ask normal questions, lor. How are you?
Just a simple welcome. That's what you say to guests, right? You could say in a very Singaporean manner, which is to say, hello, welcome to Singapore lah.
Welcome to Earth.
Welcome, aliens, cause don't say we bojo, ah.
Cause I'll be really delighted to meet you.
You wanna come to Disneyland with a death penalty? If so, drop by our little red dot today.
And we would warmly welcome you to this island as a visitor, as a gentle visitor. Welcome. Don't eat me.
Please don't kill us, and we really want to trade with you.
And invite an exchange of information. Let's learn from each other, transfer cultures.
We're very welcoming of immigrants. And if you can contribute $100,000 and you have wealth or plutonium or whatever, I mean, maybe you can get a Singapore citizenship. But if you're poor, then don't come lah, unless you want to sweep roads.
I think the main thing that we are looking at is establishing contact. So the message would most likely be there are life on Earth and we are peaceful. Peaceful lah.
We try to be. We want to be.
We are peaceful humans living on Earth.
Carl Sagan would disagree.
We come in peace.
I think we should project our aspiration, which is grounded in truth, an introduction. The rest can come later, yes. Oh, but we fight a lot.
We come in peace and multiracial harmony.
Multiracial, multi-region, multi-food varieties.
Stop and have a burger.
Greetings. Would you like chili or garlic with your chicken rice?
I would just say help.
And maybe if we still exist, maybe you can save us from ourselves because humans, we don't know what we're doing.
We are destroying the planet that gave us life. You have any advice for us?
I think we should be very, very honest about it and tell it the way it is, not the way we'd like it to be. Because people in the future will be asking, why did those guys suddenly die out? They screwed up the environment. That's what happened. And they basically all killed themselves. I think they'd be shocked, as our children are. A bit shocked about the way my generation has treated the world, and it's obviously very difficult to understand it. But yeah, they'd just be surprised. Why would anybody do that?
Human beings might seem flawed and they shouldn't be trusted most of the time. But then at certain points in time, you do find grace in them. And because of that grace, you do find that we are worth saving.
Well, this is the Chinese side of me speaking, but there's this saying, 辛苦了. It means something like good job, but it means respect. Something along the lines of keep it up. There's still a lot more to see.
我要我的国家富强，帮我。
I look at space from a more spiritual perspective, religious perspective. Because I'm Muslim, right? So in the Quran, there's a lot of references to this as well. After the science, for me, it becomes more the idea of we're living in the universe instead of the world. And you know the universe contains how many layers and you know how God created the universe. It's just these kind of things now intrigue me more than the science itself. The science I use now kind of reaffirm the theological perspective, you see, because more and more we find, at least in Islam, we find that what used to be cryptic in Islamic texts is now slowly unveiling itself because of technology.
I will have questions, I want to know the truth about souls.
Maybe our send is maybe a question to ask if reincarnation exists. I want to know what happened to our souls after our death.
Do these souls go back to them or go to another place?
Will they go to another plant or animal?
Whether they live on in another planet or...
Maybe it goes back to space? Or would it just disappear?
This Veda, Rig Veda, it says that like from nothing, nothing happened. So in the beginning, there was nothing, you know? And there was this little liquid form of a creamy substance. And from this substance, there was desire. And from this desire, everything started, this big bang, this cosmos evolved. That's what the Rig Veda says. Later comes the gods. The gods came much, much later. So this desire created God. And so from where this desire came, there's no answer for it. That's what all the scientists are still trying to find out. How this desire and who desires, that we still do not know. That question, there is no answer for it. It is the beginning of this universe.
Okay, come back to Singapore. It's a beautiful place to tell a story because we've been struggling. We have been struggling since our existence, from the pre-war days, colonial government, from the early Chinese settlers, Malay settlers, the Bugis, the Dutch, the British came, the Japanese came, the British came back. Then we formed our own independence, joined Malaysia, got kicked out. Very tumultuous, but also very interesting. But the question is, how do I tell a spaceman? This tiny little island, would it make an iota of a difference to a spaceman or not?
Well, I think it's important to know that Singapore's essence didn't begin with the British arrival. That the image that the Malays and the Southeast Asians had of Singapore was a place which had been a glorious city. And that was the one reason that Raffles gravitated here, to take advantage of that. He wanted to attract people to come here as soon as possible. Within a few months, 5,000 people came. At the time, it was huge. It was literally like a wildcat discovery. It was like a gold rush. Everyone rushed here. It was amazing, and so it became proverbial all around the world. That's why there's a town in Michigan called Singapore. It was built in around 1838. That's about 19 years after Raffles came, but already Singapore's fame was found in the frontier of America, and it was a symbol.
Unfortunately, we have propagandized it too much. The PAP government has always played up their role, but we have a very rich history. The Bugis came, Hang Jebat came, the Sri Vijayanath Empire came, and then the Chinese came and went. They were traders, they didn't care. Cheng Ho came to Thailand and Singapore, but didn't plant any flag. Then the Dutch came, not interested, it was all pirate invested. And then Raffles, he was smart. He said, this is the best place, and he and Papa built the colonial outpost.
Singapore is a big node in a very long-distance network. So Singapore had some pretty deep connections with the whole South China Sea, Indian Ocean. So it was like the Malay annals, like mythology depicted. Of course, we can't ever say that there was a king by the name of Sang Nila Utama, but we can say that there was a king at the same time that Sang Nila Utama supposedly lived. Now, Raffles believed that the annals were literally true, and when he came here, he built his house right there on Fort Canning because he found what he thought was an ancient Malay palace on the hill. And he was probably correct. Unfortunately, no one after him was the slightest bit interested, because in 1819, there wasn't any such thing as archaeology. There was no such field, and no one in the next 150 years paid any attention to it either. And so it gradually receded into the assumption that it was purely mythological. Because when Raffles first came here, there was only around 400 people. They remembered. They had a strong memory. And they said, oh, that hill is the palace, they told him. And they said, oh, no, we can't go up there. Bukit Larangan, we won't go on the hill. We won't go up there. And you can't go up there without permission. So what Farquhar did was that he hauled a cannon up the hill and then he shot it off. And he said, okay, now the spirits are all gone. That's what he did. It's described by Munshi Abdullah. And then they found all these ruins up there, and it certainly confirmed Raffles' assumption. But then they all disappeared. They built a fort, and then they built a reservoir. They built all kinds of things up there. But there was some big brick ruins when Raffles first came, and immediately the legend arose, and it was purely legendary, that it was the tomb of the last of Singapore's 5 kings, Iskandar Shah. But that is a folktale.
The richest history is, of course, 1959 or 1945 to the present. That's the most exciting. No other country in the world has gone through 4 regimes in 1 generation, but we did, and that is so unique. No other country in the world can replicate that. It's not reproducible. In 1959, we formed our own self-government from Britain. 1963, we said we'll never survive by ourselves. So we joined a bigger entity, and the Federation of Malaysia was born. 1965, thrown out. But then, we became. So you see, 5 regimes in 1 generation. And I grew up in that, and it was so fascinating. One day I was singing God Save the Queen, another day singing Nagaraku, another day singing Majulah Singapura. I never sang the Japanese anthem, that's all. But an alien might find it very fascinating. And that's why, what's this hang-up about nationalism? You live in the same place, but you're 5 people. You're schizophrenic. So you see, an alien might find it very intriguing. We are actually Singapore, that is the crux of Singapore. We are a hodgepodge of a melting pot. Rajat Ratnam's dream of a Singaporean Singapore failed. We're still a disparate diaspora of Chinese, Malays, Indians, and a mix of other races.
So then it's a melting pot, okay? A node in a network by itself, it wouldn't be anything. No natural resources. So it's got to be a place that attracts people to come here. The Singapore of today wouldn't be anything without the port or the airport. Those are the 2 things that still have to keep on being. So it's got to be welcoming. It's got to attract the best people to come here. And then that energy, the whole place then becomes this kind of organizer. Brings people in and organizes them to do things they couldn't do where they come from.
I think we've come to the understanding that without harmony, there will be no prosperity for any of us. And that is the most vital of ideas. If I can teach my children, let alone an alien, then maybe that would be the best. It's not about riches, it's about community, making a community. H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. The aliens came to kill the humans, but we humans, when we learned how to unite, we found the weaknesses of the aliens and we learned how to defeat them.
We'll send our love, our Singapore love. For a long time, I feel the people have worked very hard for this, what we are now. The hardworking people and their love towards, I may be exaggerating, but still there's this rapport within the community. It's not because the government said to do it. Without that, some people are already doing that, having different national, different race friends. And that bonding, that love, we should send that to the universe. I don't think anything negative we should send, but that bonding and that space, and we share it. And we're such a small place. Singapore is so small. You can't find it on the map even, this tiny red dot. But yet, we made it until here. And that's some grace we had. And even that grace, we do not know where it came from. It must be from this universe.
When I thought about Singapore, what's Singapore's uniqueness? I think, yeah, food is certainly one thing. I think we should talk about our passion for food and what are some of the food that we love to eat and what extent we will go in order to get that food, you know?
So send them images of our food, of our multicultural milieu. Teh tarik and prata, chicken rice, bak kut teh and nasi padang.
I think you'd want to send them something that presumably they want to consume, because that's a basic tenet of life. You consume organic matter to create more of yourself.
Prata! I would send prata. Roti prata. Because it's a good representation of the different races and cultures we have in Singapore. And it can be eaten by all races and all religion. But I don't know what the aliens are thinking. But I hope that when they eat the prata, it will change their lives. I remember the first time I ate the prata. Wow! It really changed my life.
I would send bak chor mee. I freaking love bak chor mee.
I would send popiah, a real popiah that's edible, send it up to space. I think what would be most representative of Singapore is the popiah. Because if you think about it, right, popiah is literally like the most inoffensive food ever. Nobody hates popiah. In Singapore, we're like inoffensive, right? We seek to please where we can. So I think the popiah would be a really good representation of Singapore. And the aliens, upon eating it, want to find out where did this popiah come from?
Chili crab and char kway teow.
Katong laksa can be the only iconic dish of Singapore.
So you can have your laksa and your chili crab and so on, but certainly durians. I thought that would be a very uniquely Singaporean thing. Queuing, and this durian has got this, if you can capture that smell.
Big, old, ugly durian. The Esplanade juxtaposed with a real durian, and then a Singaporean eating a durian. And then just say, we're a very peaceful people. All we do is like to eat, unless you're a crustacean. Crustacean-like species where I'll probably dip you in some red-hot chili sauce. Because I think food is, the key to international relations, and also intergalactic ones.
Chicken rice, nasi lemak, that kind.
Unless they're a race of chickens. And then, they might get irritated and consider you cannibalistic. You never know what you're gonna come across, right? So I'd be flexible and adjust. Maybe have a vegetarian dish. Unless they're a race of vegetables.
Oh, I feel proud about Singapore food. Where else in the world you can eat the food? Like Western countries, don't say lah, Western food ah. I prefer Singapore food. But then all the delicious dish that want the gravy food cannot send to spaceship one.
Quite hard to send Singapore food. It will get soggy generally.
Then I can make prawn fried asam, send to spaceship. Or I can make roast pork, send to spaceship. They can eat all the dry food, right?
So it has to be synthetic, right? It has to be like captured. And yeah, you don't send the real thing there.
But maybe we can send those paste, right? Like the laksa paste or the curry paste. Then they can have a taste.
I mean, we can send them prepared food lah. You see, right, the space all got vacuum, gao one. The spaceman can eat one.
Then I can send to the spaceship all this dry food, roast pork, roast chicken, prawn fried asam dry, put in plastic bags, send to spaceship, and then rice cannot send to spaceship.
Send them like a food bundle. Oh, send them chicken rice.
Wow, I'll be damn happy to find chicken rice in space
I know, right? Wow, this food bundle damn amazing Got roti, prata, nasi lemak, chicken rice.
Don't have to be all these typical chicken rice, all this I mean, yeah lah, if you go by the government logic, right, then this is Chinese food, this is Malay food. But actually don't have to, the aliens don't have to know whether this is Chinese or this is Malay. They just need to know that this place, right, got this thing can already, what?
Oh no, Singapore sling, durian McFlurry.
Can I put kaya toast in my food ball?
pork?
Yes, carrot toast is delicious.
It's important.
Mee goreng can send to spaceship.
Mee rebus. Then you put the soup right and the noodles separately. If not soak too long, right, well, 不好吃, not nice already, you know. I mean, it's not dry lah, but let's say you do it like the army style, the prepared kind, right? Then anything you find in the food court lah, correct not? Yong tau fu, chicken rice, duck rice, lor mee I will send duck rice. I like duck rice. Oh wait, I will actually send kway chap but I think kway chap, this kind of thing very rare, very novelty one, very few people eat one. Aliens should try things like pig intestines things like this.
Hey Bia can send to spaceship. Put in the Ziploc bag and send to spaceship.
I don't know anybody. Like you may meet a villager from China or anywhere. It's the have you eaten in dialect. We come from a poor background. The hunger has been satisfied. That's why it's a greeting. Have you been cared for? It's our roots.
I think the question of sustainability tends to loom quite large, whether you're on Earth or on another planet. When I think of the Singapore sustainability story, I tend to think of the satellite picture that shows that we are the #1 city in the world in terms of green cover. Fellow Earthlings think that we are very urbanized and concrete. But the fact of the matter is, when you look at a top-down picture of us, there's a lot of green and a lot of blue.
When you look at Singapore from space, you see that it's 50% covered in green. Yes, we all take it for granted that we see trees everywhere, but there are 6 million trees on this tiny little island.
Cleanliness, greenery, trees, we have a world in a small country.
When you drive to Choa Chu Kang there's an animal bridge for the animal to cross from one side to the other.
I would send animals, provided they don't die lah.
Can I put a stray cat?
Put a what? Why would you want to put a stray cat?
There are a lot of stray cats.
Well, technically, we have a Singapore cat. The Singapura cat. Maybe so that's one thing we could stick into the capsule. It's actually a manipulated breed. It's a cross between an Abyssinian and something else. But the Abyssinian is actually the Singapore cat because there aren't any cats like that in Abyssinia and Ethiopia. And it's speculated that actually what happened was that a diplomat had kept some Singapore local alley cats and then brought them to Ethiopia on another mission and then brought them back to the UK and bred them and called them Abyssinians. But actually, technically, they're Singapore cats. Maybe so even the Singaporean cat is not really Singaporean.
Hey, actually, we can send them the Zhao Cai Mao, the fortune cat. But we look very aggressive, look like want to fight. But it's not even a Singaporean cat. Why does everybody's car have it?
No cats. I'm anti-cat. I'll choose crabs. Crabs.
It's the smaller creatures we have in Singapore that are unique. For example, there's this crab in Bukit Timah. It's called Johora singaporensis. We can find them in freshwater streams in Nee-Soon, Bukit Timah. And now trying to reproduce them so they don't die out. Can be found nowhere else. It's endemic. That means nowhere else has this crab. So you see, we actually have a very rich biodiversity. And an alien might find it very surprising that despite the built-up, the commerce-oriented society, the business thinking, we have one of the richest biodiversity in this part of the world, in land and in the sea.
I will provide specimens. Send specimens of life inside something. Or they could be dead. Send a taxidermic kitten or something.
Yeah, you could stuff Aming and send her along. We could send a mounted specimen of Aming the orangutan to represent Singapore. In fact, I was talking with one of our former presidents many years ago, who was a very discredited president, President Devan Nair, and he met Aming and he said to me, do you know that apart from Lee Kuan Yew, Aming is the most famous animal, or personality, in Singapore? And he was probably right at that time. And probably Lee Kuan Yew would be the other.
Send them one Lee Kuan Yew photo, can already, legit. You all know the black and white, the Lee Kuan Yew picture? That one everybody have, right? That one must give.
Obviously, he is the most important personality to have come out of Singapore, so I would pay him due respect. But yeah, I don't know. It's a very fascinating idea.
Merlion.
Merlion?
Like, maybe I honestly wouldn't mind sending the Merlion. Singapore is like our symbol.
I don't think there's any symbol or animal mascot that's like that. So I sent pictures to the Merlion and things are my childhood.
But I was thinking, no one's ever actually heard or speculated what the Merlion actually sounded like, right? Does it have the vocal capabilities of a fish or a lion? Maybe it's a bureaucrat. But actually, the Malayan is female.
Oh, the one that portray one there's one at Sentosa, one that has a lift that you can go up. So two at Fullerton, one is baby, one is the portray one.
Yeah, did you know that one of the Malayans is actually female? But it has a mane. And I think that's great. A queer chimera.
To represent Singapore and send out, I go to Singapore's Changi Airport, go to the tourist store, shop, buy a Malayan fridge magnet, send that out to the stars. The Malayan is like Singapore Tourism Board's invention, right?
Hiya, girl. Malayan is fake one. Something a humans created.
It's mainstream, right? And I feel like that's what Singapore is, and that's what the Malayan is.
No lah, the Malayan is too much construct, too abstract already.
I mean, obviously the aliens, upon seeing it, won't realize that it's mainstream, but I think they can tell it's symbolic in some way because it looks somewhat organic.
If I show them the Malayan Scully, they come in and they don't see the real Malayan how?
And then that's Singapore for you. Everything about us is a front. And then when you come here and you finally see it, it's a lie. It's a fridge magnet.
Oh, let's send the SAR 21. It's the NS rifle, because it's iconic.
What if they think we want to fight them?
No, it's a peace offering. You're laying down your weapon.
It's only one, eh? We have how many thousands?
Okay, you can send the magazines with the bullets.
Or our hometown law, like HDB.
A neatly arranged block of HDB flats.
There's one that's always on the TV, the Tampines one.
The housing, the infrastructures lah.
I would just run around the whole of Singapore and take pictures non-stop. You just have to take pictures of building, that's all. Like hotel, condo, office, and the beach, and maybe Marina Bay. You know the building with the 3 hotel and the ship at the top. I would draw Punggol, the HDB flat, and my grandma house down here. And I always see a lot of cars and traffic light, and got tracks for LRT, and I would draw a fighter jet plane with Singapore flag.
I would try and send a picture of Earth and its position in the solar system. I think that would be sort of our unique identifier. And it helps to tell a viewer what kind of life form we are. People talk about us being in the Goldilocks zone, where the temperature is just right for this carbon-based life form. So yeah, I think if I were to try to send a message up and make contact with friendly civilization, we would like to say, hey, we are this kind of sentient beings. This is our home, and this is where we are. This is our star. If you were to look for us, maybe try and look for a solar system with a star of that size and this number of planets.
You just have to go to outer space and take a picture.
Singapore is just a tiny dot.
It really is a little small red dot.
We are not a dot. We are not a circle. We are a very nice picture, like a jigsaw puzzle.
I think the second message is about our culture, who we are and all that. And that I think is relevant to the extraterrestrial because it's about joy and purpose. Meaning when you start telling them about what our culture is and how we live, and it starts communicating to them about what is it that gives us joy as well as a sense of identity and meaning. I guess if you were to tell the ET, okay, this is who we are, this is how we live, these are some of our traditions and cultures, and this is how we find joy and meaning through sharing food, through expression of the arts, through religious traditions. That's where I would then go into some of the things that are a little bit more uniquely Singapore.
Unique?
Uniquely Singapore. Actually, nothing in Singapore is unique. Maybe the night safari is just about the only unique thing in Singapore. That's probably the strength of Singapore. It's the fact that we have absolutely nothing. We have no hinterland, no space. We have nothing, and yet we've created this huge economy out of nothing, and that's probably the strength of Singapore. I mean, for instance, Singapore has more wildlife attractions than... You can't go anywhere and find so many wildlife attractions. So we actually have the audacity to say, come to Singapore and see wildlife, which is like crazy.
Send a plant.
或者是 send national flower.
Orchid. Maybe like the orchid.
The Vanda Miss Joachim.
Okay, I would send an image of a funeral at the HDB void deck. I think it's a very unique way of holding a funeral, as compared to other countries.
My mother will send a Hong Kong Jing.
Someone reciting the pledge.
I would send up our national pledge. There's a lot to think about in that one. Yeah,
You could send it out in all 4 national languages if you wanted to. Yeah.
You know tempat larangan, the danger, keep out in 4 languages? That's what I would send up. The one on government buildings specifically with the man being scared, because I think it encapsulates it has the multiracial aspect, it has the Singapore is paranoid about the security aspect, it also has very intuitive photos nyeh. So yeah, the danger sign, but the one they specifically put on government buildings to show you that they will shoot you. I can't think of anything that encapsulates Singapore more than government paranoia about security in 4 different languages. And it's everywhere, and it's also a CCTV nation, you know?
I think we are one of the only ones that are so specific about the 4 language thing. Our danger signs are going to be very useful to archaeologists in the future.
Oh, Singapore flag.
Those make it easier to recognize Singapore.
The Singapore flag represents Singapore. 5 stars.
As for images, photographs, or artworks depicting our way of life from the crowded public transport.
People queuing up at MRT because of train breakdown. People queuing to buy McDonald's because of Minions and Hello Kitty. People angry when they don't get their curry sauce from McDonald's.
Images of us walking in a narrow passageway, reading their phones, watching their show.
But also, I think what you can send is how Singaporeans, when needed, they can do something lah. Send the good and the bad. And when I talk about bad, it's not really bad. It's just our collective experiences as Singaporeans. Like kids buying ice cream from ice cream truck, or workers chopping their seats with tissues at hawker centre, especially at the CBD areas.
The choke culture.
Oh, can say we put all Singaporean problems that cannot be solved now into the time capsule so that we can solve them in the future when technology progresses.
And then when you go into the whole visual arts field, you have your paintings, you have your films, you have your visual arts. Those are visual as well.
I think of art first because so much of our culture is appreciated visually.
I would send up Royston Tan's Old Places. It's beautiful. He films disappearing places, old places that are disappearing. It has this kind of idea of nostalgia, which I don't know if it exists in space, but it would be a pretty cool thing to send up. I think it's also quintessentially Singaporean that nothing sticks around for long. We are so obsessed with what's new and shiny, and then we artificially create heritage. Once we've destroyed it, we artificially create it.
I thought that the movie Singapore Dreaming is quite a good thing to send to space. Because firstly, it's by a Singaporean director lah. And secondly, it represents a Singaporean life very accurately, without overselling on the racial harmony and all that shit lah.
小孩不笨.
Check their movies, all of them.
But are they representative artworks that all Singaporeans will know one? No, right? I'm not saying there are no artists in Singapore. There are plenty of artists in Singapore. I know. The Golden Staircase. And you know SK Low, she painted My Grandfather Road? It is those everyday art that I feel should be art.
Oh, the art of Charlie Chan Hock Chai.
I would send up Singapore, You Are Not My Country by Alfian Sa'ad. I think if you're going with the idea of a people trying to figure out who they are, people on either side of the fence, people who feel left out, I think it's not a poem that people would normally say is patriotic, but I always feel when I read it that there is a deep sense of anger in the poem. And I think you can only be angry about things you still cared about. And if you've ever corresponded with Alfian, his sign-off is always, if you care too much about Singapore, first it'll break your spirit, and then it'll break your heart. There's something about that that always twinges at me. I think that's the work of a writer. I think when someone points out that there's injustice in this country or that we're not doing well, there's always this kind of backlash that, oh, you're trying to ruin the multiculturalism, or you're not appreciating the government enough. And I think that can't be further from the truth. I think it's because you care that you want to critique and make things better for all of us. So, if I had to send up a poem, that's what I'd send, because it's real.
Maybe we should send images. Visuals would be the most informative. Because any form of life that is there, they must have certain basic senses, and sight is crucial. It's more crucial perhaps than speech. They might have a big brain, they can process things, but you need to get this input, this stimuli from the environment. So visuals will be the most important. I wouldn't set up microscopic images. They might think that we are organisms. I think we should send a picture of a family because it shows that we are a community. In our society, I think the basic unit is the family.
Maybe my life, how I bring up my children, how I use my life. Maybe can send up a videotape and then can do a film of my entire life and how people live, how they start from young and how they get old. The start till the ending. Can start with a pregnant woman and how she give birth and how the baby learn to talk and walk and then grow until old. And then when old already, go back to the same thing. Because people say that when you are old, you go back to being a baby. You cannot walk already, so you need a wheelchair. Like that lor.
I think that would really sum up human existence. Because that's the core of who we are. We all exist within families, not some mass-produced cloning experiment. And that's really the foundation of our society and all human interaction.
And then you have your images on the culture side. I suppose it could be our... Okay, so for images on the culture side, right, you have your Chinese temples, you have your Indian temples, you have your mosques, all these places of religious worship. I think it's important to be able to show that diversity.
Oh, I also want to share a picture of the diversity in Singapore.
Yes, I think it's important to depict that. This is who we are, and we are multicultural. So you have your Chinese, your Malays...
My teachers say that Singapore people got Eurasian, Indian, and Singaporean, and Chinese.
Different backgrounds, different ethnicities.
Different kinds of humans are, but actually we are all smiling in the same picture, and we are holding hands in hand to show that even though we are different, we are all actually united as one.
Our multiculturalism. It is a very complex issue, but I think if you go right to the core of it, when it functions well, when it does its best job, I think we really do have a Singaporean identity that is uniquely multicultural.
I think that what makes Singapore is the people.
I think this entanglement comes into this country too. How we're all different nationals. We're all entangled together with all the races. So it's like quantum particles getting entangled. How we're all entangled together as human race. When you give us a chance, immediately we're entangled in one way or another, mentally, physically. We are entangled.
And so I guess like the idea of it being representative of Singapore is also quite central to the question. Let me think. Sounds.
Sounds of Singapore?
Representative of Singapore? Okay, I'll record. No chewing gum is allowed. No chewing gum or pay and pay.
Okay, so let's say we have a sound recording, and I'm doing a 90-minute mixtape of a few recordings of music.
Sending mixtapes of the earth?
Someone should make sound recordings of shopping malls and hawker centers.
Any street or shopping center. Or a food court with a lot of people talking. A lot of noise in the background. Ceiling fans.
Hey bro, Aga 你要什么? Aga, auntie, uncle, a boy I guess. Bro, sis?
Hey, coffee shop sound, very unique in Singapore. The coffee shop uncle shout the order. Kopi si kosong tiao gin mun tai. You know what is that? Iced lemon tea. They will say iced lemon tea because it's very long. They will say gin mun tai. It's very unique in Singapore.
And also like maybe a sound recording of a day-to-day conversation between like Singaporeans. Because I find the Singapore's accent very identifiable.
Just some auntie saying like, hey, you got eat already or not? Just because it's funny to hear how they react to that.
The sound of aunties complaining in a loud muscle building in an overpopulated country.
Actually, this is my complaint. You don't think so? And then the children screaming, cannot talk, must scream. But actually, Singapore is really a very noisy place, right? I think the noise pollution here is very, very high.
In Singapore, sounds so noisy. Singapore sound
Oh, market sound. Market the fishmonger. Oi, lelongคือบุยคือlelongคือlelong fish, say lelong got sell cheap.
Like 什么啊1粒2块来 I forget what they say but yeah basically those screams in the wet market.
I also thought of the Garang-Guni man.
I got the Karang-Guni man honking on his horn.
Wow, Karang-Guni is the best lah. It's just so loud and so annoying. It just disturbs your peace. But actually, right, you feel quite happy because you earn money.
You got hear Karang-Guni man?
Your block don't have what? You live in a condo, bruh. Privilege.
And then earlier, like my parents' generation, they used to have the Tok Tok man, that noodle guy lah.
Last time the kok noodles. Pushka.
The sounds of the itinerant vendors, the tok tok men, the ting ting men.
The Hokkien Mee sellers. There's a very interesting story about this. The first major Western orchestra to perform in Singapore, Western style orchestra, was the NHK Philharmonic. They performed at the badminton stadium at Guillemard Road. Not the new one, the old one, which was a horrible place. My father brought me there. It was the first orchestra I ever heard. The conductor was Seiji Ozawa, and while he was performing, there was a Hokkien Mee seller walking amongst us, going tick, tock, tick, tock. Within all of us, you know. And then as an encore, for the encore, he played using a tick-tock accompaniment, a piece by American live music composer Leroy Anderson's The Syncopated Clock. Because it got the tick-tock sound, the clock sound lah.
It conjures a certain kind of nostalgia, certain kind of feelings of nostalgia and memory and so on. You know, there are certain merits to oracy as compared to literacy. For example, you would be wondering what the oral traditions of Singapore were like, because these sounds are no longer so readily available. So whatever you can capture, you should send them all up. They're no longer there now. It's an invisible thing. There used to be itinerant hawkers and they would sell things. They would walk along the roadsides and shout out their wares and so on. I remember doing a drawing when I was in primary 1 or primary 2, and I had this woman selling these interwoven baskets. She had them on her head, and I had her speech bubble saying, Rombong, Rombong, Rombong. You should send sounds that are invisible today. It's not the sounds of silence, it's the sounds of invisibility.
Sounds that I grew up with. You know the man who sells the chestnuts, the phrase, the bell ringing. When I was young, my mom used to buy me the gaulak. You know, from the gaulak man. And now they're disappearing. I think I hardly see them around anymore.
Sounds of my childhood, the simpler days, the sounds of nature.
When I grew up, it was all crickets,
Cicada
cicadas.
chirping.
A lot of cicadas. It was the happiest sound because it lulls you to sleep.
Oh, kokoke.
Oh, the sound. Oh, the chicken. The cock. Cuckoo, cuckoo. That one. Very. I remember last time kampong. Cuckoo, cuckoo. That one. Natural long one. Early in the morning.
I'll send frogs calling.
Frogs, they were all around. That was the old Singapore. And when my cousins used to come and stay over, they complained that they cannot sleep at night because it was too noisy. They lived in the SIT, those the PHDB days. That was when I finally sat up and I said, I don't hear them. Sounds are just all around you. I never realized how relaxing these sounds were until much later. That is why I say when I was younger, I didn't have to worry about anything because nature drifts in and out of the ears.
The morning birds that make the annoying. Oh, the bird in the morning. You know the ooh. I hate it. It's like so disruptive to my sleep.
Wow, the Uber, the the call, is it a call? I think every Singaporean, everyone who lives in Singapore can relate to that.
Yeah, I mean when you hear that, that's the sign of a new day. Or like if you go to Bukit Timah or Pasir Ris Park
or East Coast Park, or any of the beaches really. The waves. Though I like Pasir Ris Park more because I go to Pasir Ris Park a lot. I just like to sit there and listen to the wind and the waves and the random people barbecuing.
Botanic Gardens, because the place is a site for tourists, it's a site for researchers, it's a site for foreign domestic workers on their day off. It's a site for families. It's a site for music lovers. It's a very multi-dimensional site. So there'll be lots of sounds to capture just within that place.
I think it's less of capturing raw sounds. I think it's more of capturing topography sonically. It's like in photographs, right? You take a photo of a cityscape or a landscape, but I guess with sound, it's more of a oral or sonic documentation. And then it'll be up to listeners' interpretation of how they will want to decode it.
This is not from a linguist's point of view, but I would suggest this. The snore. Send the snore of a human being, then the snore of an animal, like a sleeping dog. I don't know what kind of extraterrestrial life will be listening to this record or be wondering what to make of these sounds coming from this strange place. But if they are highly intelligent compared to our species, and we are like bacteria to them, then perhaps they'll be able to figure out that the snores are not the same. There's no logic to it. It's snoring. But it's in the everyday existence of many, many lives. Sometimes lives that are ruined because couples disagree on their sleeping patterns or habits or disturbances in the night. But I can imagine the kind of stories they can weave around that.
I don't care. Screw the linear notes. For future listeners, I'd want them to use their own imagination. This is artistic work, okay? Not some branding effort.
I mean, this is about Singapore, right? So anything is fine, really. You could send a sound clip of two Singaporeans having sex, and I think that'd be very interesting.
I think my apartment, my elevator door, the chimes, I think it's a very beautiful representation of the relentless rush every day, every morning at 7. People rushing forward tirelessly, trying to keep up their pace of life and support their family, and the day begins with the chime.
I would send them the MRT announcements in all the languages.
The bus! Dee.
EZ-Link the TT. TT is for concession, then T is for adult. Wow, the change in sound very sad one. Then the TT when we go through the ERP.
Doors are closing.
Hey, but it might sound very aggressive because it sounds very fierce. I mean, the aliens don't know our language, right? So if we send them doors closing, then they will think, wow, aggressive 他妈的，你要打架, you want to fight, is it? Sorry, my imagination go very far. Yeah, what if we send them do, then later they come back down, do. How? I feel like sending them gangster. I mean, this is private because the government won't send this kind of thing one, right? But right, I think it's not just about what language, music, but also about society as a whole. So right, you see right, society got different segments, different tiers, right? You got high SES and low SES. You got educated and uneducated, right? So if I send them both, what? You send them one PM Lee rally recording, then right, you send them one gangster. So right, they know this is two different societies in the same country. This is called diversity. I think right, the gist of whatever we send them right is that this place right is diverse. No matter what, talking about food, talking about culture, talking about heritage, talking about social networks, everything is diverse.
Yeah. It will be a build-up of murmurings or indistinct chatters of all the various languages, and then interspliced. Or just this cacophony of sounds of more statements or speeches which kind of captures various historical events.
To me, it's grounded in history. Like maybe when Lee Kuan Yew was shouting, Merdeka!
Oh, LKY speaking was one of the sounds that I thought, because I guess usually it's like, show me your leader, right?
Lee Kuan Yew, I love him because without him, I won't be here talking to any of you today.
Lee Kuan Yew on the steps of City Hall shouting, Merdeka! What else? Warna or Ria, one of those Malay radio stations. I think on certain days at midnight, they have this program called Misteri Jam 12. It's like listeners calling in, sharing their spooky stories of ghostly encounters. I mean, you can tell some of them are planted, right? And then random newscasters reading the news, the local news from like every decade, something like that. Yeah. Well, I think it would have to be strictly speech-based, and I build it in a way such that it'll be more textural, so that it'll be up to listeners to see what they can pick up. Yeah. And it will be like a confluence, and gradually the intensity will be increasing, and I guess your additional speech layers could be your religious chants, your spiritual songs, the azan, and we're a mess, lah. Yeah, it's a mess.
I would send an audio clip of my kids' noises. Just whatever noises she's making, I'll record all of that and send it out. Whatever sound she's making, anything. Because if they are intelligent life forms, I would like another set of intelligent ears to listen to it and see if they can decode anything. Like, can you imagine
how much burden it could lift from the parents. Like suddenly, this is actually what it means. I don't know, I think it just relieves a lot of emotional labor, And not even just the crying, but if there are very specific language aspects that we miss out on because we don't understand the language, and we're trying very hard to understand. But what if there's a different kind of linguistic activity that's actually happening that fails to develop because we as adults don't understand it? So in a sense, what could have evolved differently, and our language could have been far more complex, but because we're idiots, right, in general, we failed to understand how that happened, and so decided to evolve in another direction altogether. But I do think that standing up the voice of my child is also quite representative of Singapore. We've been harping on future generations of Singaporeans, blah, 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 more births here, so on and so forth. So, on some level, politically, the idea of the voice of a child is also quite significant about what Singapore's future is, or what it wants to impose upon its citizens or society. I do think there's something there that's quite politically connected to a representation of Singapore.
Lion City, yeah. 笑大兩邊買路 dinosaur， 一個假牙 dos， 還有兩杯地哦，一個買路冰、可力冰、果皮冰、鐵冰哦，不要忘了還有一杯板東，還有一杯板東，喲，還有一杯板。
And then there's music, not necessarily language dependent.
Beyond languages, that's beyond countries. It transcends cultural divides or socio-economic divides.
Music is like very universal, You don't say we are so many things. We are so many things, but can be blended, can be harmonized.
Yeah, I do think it's important, I like music. It's a major part of the way human beings feel.
I think music really transcends. And so you play different musical instruments, right? And that's great. And you need to have that human voice, because the human voice represents us. And it's the greatest musical instrument there is, right? And you can have the human voice to represent singing. Not just your classical opera, but various forms of music. And I think it's a good way to kind of let them know that this kind of voice comes from us, and the kind of music that can evolve.
So you were thinking to include actual Singapore music on this record?
I think it's quite hard. Very hard to find this country's music. I mean, if you want to talk about diversity, right, you have your different ethnic groups and dialect groups, right? Then you can send them tong tong jiang also, lor. I mean, it's very diverse, right? But I don't know, I wouldn't think of sending them music to begin with, because I don't know whether it's offensive to them.
Music? No. I don't want to disturb space.
Alien also have a headache. What unique sound in Singapore want to talk, right? We are a country for migrants, from all over the world, right? India, China, only the natives are the Malays, So, what kind of sound? Instruments, Oh, the Malays one, tung tung tak tung tung, That's why I say, what sort of sound do you represent?
In Singapore, especially for music, and I guess for literature and theatre as well, we're always constantly seeking for something definitive for ourselves. Like, what's Singapore music? How should it be represented? What is Singapore visual arts? Sometimes I'm like, stop asking. Just keep doing lah. If we want to ask questions about what is definitive of a Singaporean art form, then we should look to the past. And for the present, we should just be creating and let future generations decide on what's definitive for the time when we were there.
Yeah, any kind of creative endeavor, something like music or art, even if there's something within the confines of language. For example, if someone's writing a poem, it doesn't matter. We need not refrain. We can still write and send it and let them do the decoding, if and when they get it. Yeah.
There was a conference in Yale NUS which asked, is there such a thing as Singapore music or Singapore performance? I was invited to speak, and the first time I gave the talk, I was like, okay, there's really no such thing as Singapore music as a style. So I came up with this title called The Rujakness of Singapore Music, which is quite accurate actually. Most of my colleagues and predecessors, they run in quite a different style, have different interests, have different influences, and studied in different places. So if you want to talk about Singapore classical music, or whatever you call it lah, new music, contemporary music, it is just not as unified like Finnish music or Russian music, as in they have a distinctive style, but for us, it's more like abundance. This plurality of style that's kind of rojak.
I think it has to be eclectic. It has to be, right, to do justice to Singapore.
Yeah, there's so much, and I'm not even looking into Singyao at this point. I'm just looking at S350 because there's just an explosion of stuff. There was a piano concerto by Kelly Tang for 50 pianos. Lala was a soloist along with 50 pianos and the whole orchestra. He weaved in some folk songs as well. Geylang Sipaku Geylang. Leong Yun Hin. He's like the grandfather of Singaporean composers. He has this nice choral piece called Dragon Dance, which is kind of ching chong lah, but it's so good. It's so well written. If you want to talk about early, middle, and contemporary composers, for Singyao, it would have to be Liang Wenfu.
When I was young, there were not many songs that were created in Singapore. Only during the Singyao era that there were songs made in Singapore.
就像我们自己创作的民谣，他们叫做新谣 ，they are called 新谣。Recently they've been playing all Liang Wenfu songs again on the radio, like 五角鸡 Five Foot Way 啊，我们是新加坡人 ，we are Singaporeans. This represents Singapore.
So I guess we should send some gamelan up as well. It's technically not from Singapore, but it's from the area. Pang Kok Jun, who is the resident composer of Ding Yi On Zong. I think he has written some pieces that combine Chinese instruments and gamelan. So Chinese and Malay influences mixed together. Oh, I also have something by Joyce Ho which has like everything. It's called Yi Dian Tong. Chinese, Western, Indian, gamelan, and Korean.
Peranakan song. Burung kakak tua. Burung kakak tua. I cannot remember already. I remember few words only.
I would say Bunga Sayang. I don't even know whether it's a Singapore song or whether it's composed by a Singaporean. Oh, the one by Rahima Rahim is very nice.
Or like local indie pop or the musical scene. That's quite vibrant, you know, with composers like Julian Wo or Pang Wenfu. There are just so many genres, as I mentioned, jazz or keroncong.
Katina Dahari, this keroncong singer, she has an amazing voice. She has this song called Sejak Kita Berpisah, since our separation.
We live in Singapore by Hossein Young. It's funny, it's vibrant, it perfectly captures the idiosyncrasy of living in Singapore.
Oh, there's Shafiqah, our alumni. She has this nice opera piece called Ikango. She's a prominent Malay Singaporean composer. I suppose you can also send up some local indie pop music like the Samuels or something. I do like them.
We should send audio clips of our music and the diversity that comes with it. From someone like Shiga Shea to, oh, there was this guy, Siva Choi. He had this album called Why You So Like That. I think this was back in the 90s and he was kind of like our stand-up guy. Or someone like Puma would be damn funny.
What people would know is National Day songs.
National songs ah.
I sent the most tolerable National Day song there is, but I haven't found it yet.
Obviously, the more popular NDP songs. Not like One Singapore, but more like We Are Singapore. Very iconic songs. Songs that are representative of our shared culture.
We are Singapore, we'll stand together with the lions roar. But then they might think it's a war cry. I mean, it's a bit aggressive, right? Lions roar? You might want to go with a softer Chan Mali Chan kind of thing.
NDP songs. But nothing after 2004. Literally nothing after 2004 should be sent anywhere, to aliens or otherwise.
I would say home, but that's so cliche.
That one lah, we know that one. Dick Lee. I think he kind of like, he epitomizes Singapore. Dick Lee and Jacinta, send them both up.
It's hard to beat Dick Lee lah. Even for himself, it's hard to do that right. To come up with the hits every year is really hard, you know. Dick Lee's Singapore Para, Fried Rice Paradise, Beauty World. Wow, that's a good time capsule and that's really from the 1980s. It's just so different from now. I guess Dick Lee's Home, the National Day song, is the alternative to the anthem.
The only genuinely popular National Day song, am I right? I've been involved in this old Ministry of Culture songwriting competitions for donkey's years. I worked together with a guy, Dr. Ishmael Sadaruddin, who was head of something called the Ministry of Cultural Defense. I don't know what it was called lah. I told him, you are the head of the Ministry of Propaganda. I told him that. Anyway, so he and I chaired the committee, and I was the one chairing while he was the guy I worked with. So for 6 or 7 years, we wrote the National Day songs. We were tasked with it. We had to get the songs written, and we had to go down to NDP, all the military fellas, and ask them for songs, and convince them. So what we would do was we would go to good songwriters like Dick Lee and ask them for songs lah. So Dick has like 3 or 4 National Day songs, but Home has a curious history. He submitted a melody, no words. So we put it inside. Then in 97 and 98, you know the mood of the nation was very bad because of the Silk-Air crash and the Asian financial crisis. So we sat down and we said, look, the usual National Day songs are all rah, 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 but it makes no sense to have one like that. Then we looked at Dick's melody, a beautiful melody, and we said, let's use it. So we asked Dick, can you write the words lah? And he wrote the first verse, which was perfect, the first verse. And we said, you got to write a second verse. I remember calling him in Hong Kong, and over that phone call, we knocked out the second verse. Then we had Kit Chan lah, and everything came together perfectly. And we didn't expect, we had to go down to all the generals and the colonels and say, look, we cannot have a rah-rah song. And to their eternal credit, they agreed immediately. I think this is the only National Day song that is genuinely popular for its own sake.
Our National Day song and our national anthem.
I would send our national anthem because it will confuse the shit out of everybody. Because everything else is in English, maybe even in Mandarin. But our national anthem is in Malay, and we don't even speak Malay.
It's sort of like an audio flag that you plant in space. You know, like when people go to space and they plant their flag there.
If they understand actual human language, just play the national anthem, because then they can see the sound resonates. If it does then, they can come along.
It represents onward Singapore, because we are always trying to move forward. Like we are always trying to be first, and if anything, it encompasses a lot of aspects of Singapore, like our kiasu culture and how we always want to be the first in everything in terms of paper chase.
Actually, one of the songs that came to mind was the national anthem, Majulah Singapura, because it's an essential part of our cultural history in terms of our scientific history and our musical history, because I've been involved in both of them, of course. I want to tell you about this because this is a very interesting story. This has not been documented properly. So the national anthem was written by Zubair Syed. And when Zubair Syed was tasked by the PAP, before self-governance in 1959, when they formed the whole government, I think sometime in 56 or 54, they captured the city council. So the city council looked after places like the Victoria Theatre and all that. And the Victoria Theatre was under renovation, and they commissioned Zubair Syed to write a piece for its opening. Now, whether or not it's actually played at the opening, I don't know. But the first performance of this piece, Majulah Singapura, was sometime in 56 or 57, when the Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, visited Singapore, and the combined schools choir sang it then. Then in 59, when self-governance was attained, the PAP adopted it as the national anthem. Unfortunately, the details of this incident are all shrouded in mystery, because anyone could have told me something about this are all dead. Zubair Syed's dead. Toh Chin Chai, our former vice-chancellor, who was responsible for the anthem and the flag, the pledge was S. Rajaratnam. I mean, I should have asked him lah, but he's gone now. And the musicians were probably involved. Paul Abhishek Sheganathan, who was heavily involved in this project, he could have arranged it. He's gone too. Anyway, what happened was this. When Zubair Syed wrote the national anthem, it was a song with 2 verses. The verse was 16 bars and the chorus was 8 bars. So the government made the decision to shorten the verse from 16 bars to 8 bars. So the reasons could have been that it was sung in Malay. Why not make it shorter? Make it shorter, easier to sing. The chorus remains as it is. The verse, they knocked out the middle and they collapsed it. I found a recording by the Radio Singapore Choir of the original version, so it's not a figment of my imagination. Did they politically do a good job when they shortened it? I suppose true lah. Maybe for people who can't speak Malay, it's already bad enough that they can't sing. The verse is very long with a lot of complicated words in the middle. So maybe they cut it out for that reason. Okay, so that's the history of the national anthem.
I've always wondered what people would think about music, because music is so... Well, who knows if any other civilization in the universe would even have such a thing. Art, yes, it would have some kind of art, but it may be some kind of art we don't even understand today. Even on Earth, there are so many different kinds of music. Different cultures have different ideas on what sounds beautiful.
Yes, if they haven't been exposed to all this, all gobbledygook, maybe there's a rhythm. Rhythm is providing that they have carbon-based biology like us, then they'll understand rhythm. We're all made of rhythm. Plants respond to rhythm.
So the rhythm of life, the rhythm in meaning, rhyme, and reason.
I realized that in dance, any kind of dance, there's this universe because the particles are moving too. They have a rhythm. There's this rhythm going on and moving. That's what I found. Actually, it made me feel very, very goosebumpy. Everything is dancing. The particles are dancing. The universe is dancing. Everything goes in a rhythm. And I think that's the best part of this whole universe. Your heartbeat is a rhythm. So everything is rhythmic. Without rhythm, I don't think any other part of this cosmos, anything can work.
Singapore has launched quite a number of satellites by now. We do not have our own launch facilities, but the technology has become sort of a commodity. Many people are actually willing to launch rockets for you, and if Singapore wanted to, Singapore is definitely capable of sending such a probe into space. Now the question, of course, is why we would want to. You can talk about the spin-offs, about the technology that comes with it, but at the end of the day, it's really curiosity-driven. People want to know what's out there. They say, can we figure it out? It's a cultural thing. But I think maybe, culturally, Singapore is still not yet ready to do something like that. I mean, Singapore started out as a trading post, right? So people are very concerned about their bottom line every quarter. Don't you think that we are very much looking at short-term returns? And we still have that. And I'm hoping that as a scientist in NUS, I'm part of this slow cultural change where people begin to think of these fundamental questions with a bit more, to have a sense of wonder, you know, to be able to look beyond our mundane daily activities. And if you look at all the successful countries, they are the ones that manage to harness this sense of curiosity. And in the future, Singapore will definitely become a lot more technological. And a lot of this technology really started out based on curiosity. So maybe it's worth putting a bit more resources into what makes us dream and think of what's out there so that we can understand our place in this universe a little bit better.
Quantum is so small, so very, very, very small. You can't even measure that one particle. So that particle is in our body too, right? So how many particles made up our body? To think about that, I felt like I'm part of this universe. Plus, I owe something back to this universe, you know? So I need to give back. So what do I give back? Because my body is made of this universe. So what can I give back to this universe? Such a beautiful form I've had. All of the beautiful images that I've acquired in my brain, all plotting up like plotting paper. So what do I give back to this universe? I do not know. What can I give back? The whole universe is within you. So whatever is within us is this universe. Some people may not understand what that is, but that is the truth.